Hello there. We have been talking about different story formats, and we have talked about turning point 1, turning point 2, turning point 3, and now we are at the last turning point, which is called turning point 5. I have been explaining about Erin Brockovich and Gladiator. Now let's understand what happens in the last part, which is technically turning point 5, but obviously aftermath is after there. But turning point 5 is like after this there is no turning point, so this is going to be, technically it is going to be climax. So what happens in climax? Suppose if I ask you, what do you want in the climax? Obviously everybody wants that whatever the journey has been that he or she has been witnessing as part of the audience must reach a logical conclusion. That is what people expect in as far as climax is concerned. I'll be explaining climax in a very different context when I'll be talking about a different story format, which is basically a pyramid, a pyramid story format, which is developed by Gustav, and we will talk about how that story format is used in advertising, how that story format is used by William Shakespeare also, and how that story format is like if you are making a Hyundai ad, how that story format is also used, how it was used in Romeo and Juliet, how it was used in Hamlet, and how it is used in different films. Now, if we take this last portion, which is leading us to turning point 5, turning point 5 is the last turning point, and this last turning point is where she has been developing a case. Erin Brockovich and Ed Misery has been developing a case. They have been convincing people. A lot of other people also come in the equation. They are being removed because people are convinced with Erin Brockovich. So now Erin Brockovich's primarily objective is to mobilize the Hinckley's families towards a consensus on engaging in binding arbitration, while concurrently seeking to gather compelling events that implicates the corporate office of PG&E. Now, in the film Gladiator, the character Maximus is depicted as engaging in a plot to liberate himself from the control of Proximo, the guy who brought him in the arena, and then they assume the leadership of the former army to confront Commodus. Ultimately, Maximus aims to transfer authority over the Rome to the Senate. Now, when I speak like this, what do you make a sense of it? That in the film Gladiator, the character Maximus is depicted as engaging in a plot to liberate himself from the control of Proximo, and then assuming the leadership of his former army to confront Commodus. Now, these are hardly 20 words, but the day I also as a writer or director, or you as a writer or director, the day you are able to spill these 20 words in a fertile land which is called mind and generate 20 pages out of it, that day you are paid for your writing. These are not 20 or 23 words. These are basically seeds which needs to be sprouted out, or which need to be harvested properly, because the depicted in engaging in a plot. Now, what plot? Then you really have to develop a situation which has the caliber of being called plot. How a gladiator who has been in jail, obviously under Proximo, who has been gaining power, will try to liberate. Who are the people, those who will be involved in the equation? How he will be doing that? What are the resources that he need? Are the circumstances favorable outside the area that they have been residing, where they can go and meet people? If they are gladiators, if they are meeting senators, who is supporting them? What is their back-end story? So when I make you understand, when we read something like this, it always requires it always requires events that will convince audience. Like, if you remember that I always talk about a point which is very strongly associated with me, that writing is what you can write anything. You can write anything. Now suppose if you decide, I just give you a situation. Now suppose you decide to dig out an artifact of historical importance from one of the monuments from Delhi, in Delhi. Now it is 2023. Can you do it today? No, you can't. You can't. You just simply can't. ASI, Archaeological Survey of India, will not allow you to do any excavation as an outside agency in Delhi in any of its monuments. Then how do you write this? I logically want to develop an artifact. I logically want to find an artifact in Delhi because my story is in Delhi and I really want to take it to a magic level, and I want to root my story in Delhi. Now how, obviously CP में कोई गड्ढा नहीं खोदने देगा, ठीक है, unless you are not part of MCD, and one of the artifacts is there. You somehow find a location, you find some old map, you do something like that, whatever logic you develop, believability, the elements of believability that you and I use. Now it is not possible in 2023 unless there is a money heist kind of a plot. But if I take this story in 1960s, or if I take this story in 1950s, or just at the time of 1947, or 15th of August, or 20th of August, or 30th of August 1947. If I ask you, after giving this example, if I ask you that if I have to dig, in some site in Delhi, suppose if I want to dig, I want to find out an artifact in Qutub Minar. Can Salim Javed do that in 2023? No, he can't. But if Salim Javed is in 30th of August 1947, can he do that? Yes. Now this is what situation is same, but the moment you fiddle with the timeline, you can do whatever you want. So as I always push the point of believability. I always push one of the important components of Hindi film writing, which is that it's not believable anymore. It is like it does not have a logic, So Ganpat, I gave you an example, and I am predicting the same with Kalki also, that if the believability in plot is not there, chances are that it may not work. I said it about Ganpat, it hasn't worked. And as I'm saying about Kalki, let the film get released, we'll discuss the response, and then after seeing the film, then I'll tell you whether it will work or not. So it's not that difficult to have great VFX in an Indian film. No, it is not. We have got money as industry, we have got good resource people, we are in capacity to hire best minds in the world. But all these things fail when you do not have the believability in your own plot. So I said I want to excavate one of the locations in Delhi which is under now ASI, but today in 2023, if I want to dig out something at Qutub Minar or in Lal Killa, I can't do that. But if such is the case, I can give some logical reason in 1947 to do it. So this is what it is. So when we say that the character Maximus is depicted as engaging in a plot, reading, saying, listening, and understanding is one part of the job when it comes to writing. Producing it, having the believability element in your writing and convincing people, and they also find it as interesting as you were when you were writing the scene, is magic. So when we talk, try to get into the skin of what is being taught. Like suppose if I utter this line, ultimately Maximus aimed to transfer authority over Rome, of Rome, to the Senate. Now, how would you do it in terms of writing? What is the scene that will establish that Maximus is transferring the authority that he has earned after sacrificing his wife, after sacrificing his son? Now, the power that he has right now, he is able to transfer that. What scene is that? How will we do that? So in terms of writing, it is extremely interactive. It's extremely brainstorming session. Maybe if there is an assistant of mine, or if I am somebody's assistant, I'll give, so this is how we can achieve it. But whether it is in sync with the story that we have been developing or not is again the point. If the writer himself or herself come up with something, now is that the scene that has been written now to depict this transfer of authority of Rome to the Senate, is it in par with what we have been doing? Is it diluting the sense, the credibility of the film or not? So each page, each word, each sentence, each scene, sequence, and ultimately the entire story is a very synergical process. If it is not in, it's a chain that every link has to be strong. It is always said that the chain is as strong as its weakest link. And while you are writing, it becomes extremely difficult to trace that weakest link, and that's why people share their writing and they trust some people, where they send their scripts, they discuss कि नहीं यार ये सीन कमजोर है, इसको निकालते हैं, let's put something more of a grandeur which is like which is in sync with the story. Now, in a state of physical and emotional distress, the protagonist is compelled to undertake a perilous endeavor, utilizing all his or her available resources of resilience and bravery in order to attain his or her ultimate objective. Now, this is what I was talking about, when that you have been carrying out your story like this. Now, because 75% of the story is over, so you squeeze it. And then, the state of physical and emotional distress, the protagonist is compelled to undertake a perilous endeavor, utilizing all his or her available resources of resilience and bravery in order to attain his or her ultimately objective. So, what the words that I am saying, you are listening, understanding, I'm trying to make you understand. It is all, how do we translate these words into action? Action is basically when you are writing the screenplay. How do we do that? That's the purpose. Now, specifically, Thelma and Louise, as I was talking about, are faced with the daunting task of evading the pursuit of Federal Bureau of Investigation as they strive to cross the border. While in the Kennedy that I'm talking about, family must engage in a diplomatic negotiation with the Soviet Union within a limit of time frame of 13 days. Now, we feel a sense of urgency, now, because all the options have been squeezed. There is one path which need to be followed. It need to be done. It need to be achieved. Now, the protagonist, or whosoever is with the protagonist, has no possibility of looking back or going back. This is like you have burnt all your boats and you are standing at a stand where you have no option but to move forward. This is especially that sort of a situation. Now, during this phase of the screenplay, the tension intensifies significantly, the narrative tempo quickens, and several obstacles are strategically placed to impede the progress of protagonist until they reach the turning point 5, the last turning point that we have been talking about. This was basically the story part that we have been talking about. Now, let's see what happens in terms of turning point. Now, in the legal case, involving Erin Brockovich, it is noteworthy that Erin and Ed secures a substantial settlement amounting to 330 million. George, if you remember George that I was talking about, the person who becomes the emotional support for Erin Brockovich, the relevant party makes a comeback. Now, look at the first image. Unemployed, Erin is unemployed, broke, she does not have work. Now, by the time you have turning point 5, she has, a substantial part of 330 million, which is around, this is an actual life case where she actually got 2 million as her share of profit, So somebody who is broke, and 2 million at that point of time, somewhere 80s, and at the end of the story, no, this is technically is not at the end of the story. I'll tell you when we talk about climax what happens, why Truman Show has an abrupt ending, and why Gladiator does not have an abrupt ending. They have something called aftermath also. Now, Erin is able to secure that sort of a money. Now, in the film Gladiator, the protagonist Maximus engages in a climatic confrontation with the antagonist Commodus within the confines of Arena. Now, within the confines of Arena, you have seen a lot of films where within the confine of Arena there is a fight. Like in Prithviraj also, there is a last scene where the blind Prithviraj is fighting with lions, and then he targets the antagonist when he listens the voice, and then शब्द भेदी बाण जिसे हम कहते हैं, ठीक है, then he fires that, and this is how the antagonist is killed. But again, everybody has got this confines of Arena thing. Now, what makes Gladiator unique? What do you want? Like, suppose if if I am being hired to write, and there is a producer sitting next to me, then if I ask my producer, so what do you want in this at the end of the story? Obviously, the producer's answer is, I want my character to win, because that is what he has been planning. That is what he has been thinking. That is what in favor of people, because if he becomes the king, he will be giving power to senates, all those things. But what if I tell you that your character is technically he is going to die. Maybe he will lose the battle also, because he has been wounded. And not only wounded, he has the dagger with which he has been wounded was poisonous, was put in poison and then was jabbed. Now, what do you expect out of it? Obviously, you expect more drama as compared to that you want your character to win only. Now, that is what makes writing great. You know that your character is wounded, he's poisoned, he's weak, and all the situations, all the arrangement in the arena is in favor of antagonist. Even then, the protagonist means the hero has to win. How do you do it? How do you bring it out? Matching the expectation of the audience, or rather surpassing the expectation of the audience, is the game of writing. Now, after this, the film's climax necessitates the occurrence of many pivotal events. Foremost, the protagonist must confront the most formidable challenge encountered throughout the narrative. That's why it's climax. Secondly, he or she must assert agency in shaping his or her destiny. And lastly, the resolution of the overarching motivation must be definitely achieved. Now, what are all these things that I have just said? Whatever journey that your protagonist was on must reach a definite conclusion. Whatever aim he or she has or had in her mind must be achieved. And all these two things must be achieved with a very clear character graph. Now, what is character graph? Erin broke, Erin rich at the end of the film. Gladiator powerful, physically fit, though technically a very similar thing, that he is powerful but not physically fit. He is full of life, he is dead. Opposite sides. So you started with something here and you finished film here, and there must be a triangle that I'll be talking about, or there must be some ways, some waves, all these things that we need to, for these things we need to see films. Now, the pivotal moments in the narrative involves the protagonist entering the twister. Like if you have seen Men in Black, a colossal extraterrestrial entity and the Jewish factory workers successfully executing their escape in the film called Schindler's List. Now, this is my personal recommendation. If you really want to be a student of film, there are few films. Technically, we must see all the films, because unless you do not know what is a good film or a bad film, it is very difficult to choose a very good film. Like when I was young, I used to love Tufan also, Amitabh Bachchan's film. Technically, I got to know later that it's a film which did not do well. But fine, today I have that sensibility to criticize or like that film. But when I was a kid, I really enjoyed that film. So doesn't matter. But if you are a student of mass communication, there are few films that you should see. Schindler's List is one of them. And if you know about the history of Jew and German, the concentration camp, there are some Jews which are called Schindler's Jews. So Schindler was a man. You must see this film. You will understand what a mindset can do, how a community has the resilience power, and how do they survive. It's a beautiful film. A good portion of the film is in black and white. Then there is a specific scene where a girl, the entire scene is black and white, and a girl is walking in a red dress. Beautiful film. It's like critically acclaimed, very profitable film also. It's on the both side, commercially successful also and critically acclaimed also, won a lot of Oscars also. And this is one film that you definitely must see, Schindler's List, and obviously Gladiator and Erin Brockovich simultaneously, because that is what we are discussing. Now, it should be noted that the climax has the potential to manifest at any point, ranging from 90% mark of the screenplay to the concluding moment, which is like technically 99% of the film. The precise positioning will be ascertained based on the duration required for the aftermath. Now, this aftermath is something which makes us weak as a writer, and which makes the writer of Gladiator or Erin Brockovich strong. When I developed this sense of writing, of understanding cinema, of directing, then I was like, climax pe pahunch jayenge, kaam ban jayega. So this aftermath is basically where she received 2 million as part of the compensation, and Erin Brockovich is remained employed alongside Ed. And in the film Gladiator, the character Maximus is ultimately reunited with his family in death, and his remains, that's what makes it aftermath, and his remains are ceremoniously carried away by the newly established leaders of the Roman Republic as a mark of respect. In cinematic narrative, it is uncommon for a film to conclude directly upon achieving the protagonist's primary goal. And if you conclude at the primary goal, this aftermath is not there. But if you take a logical conclusion from there and create a scene where one of the gladiator friends buries the small statues that he used to pray, all that, and then he's leaving the arena, that completes the aftermath. And this is 5 turning points. In the next video, we'll take up something so interesting that you can use in writing your advertisements, and then you can use that in writing your films also. Thank you very much.